Most people never hear this, or they hear it and immediately push it away. Not everyone who is alive is truly living. Many are simply moving through routines, waking up, working, surviving, repeating, without ever stopping to ask a single uncomfortable question. And that question is not, how do I succeed? Or, how do I be happier? It is much simpler and much more dangerous. Who am I, really, in the middle of all this? If that question has never appeared in you even once, then this video may feel strange, heavy, or unnecessary. And that's okay. Not everything is meant for everyone, and not every truth arrives at the same time. But if, at some point in your life, that question surfaced on its own, not because a book told you to ask it, not because someone inspired you, but because something inside you quietly broke open, then this video might be speaking directly to you. Welcome to the channel HOLSUS. What I share here is not meant to teach you how to live, and it does not promise peace, success, or enlightenment. It is simply an invitation to look at something most people spend their lives avoiding. The possibility that suffering does not come from life itself, but from the way we are constantly resisting it. This is not comfortable. It is not motivational, and it does not flatter the ego. But it is honest. If you feel a subtle pull, a quiet curiosity, or even a sense of unease right now, I invite you to stay. And if this kind of reflection resonates with you, consider subscribing to HOLSUS to support the channel and allow it to continue creating slow, meaningful, and truthful content. Before we go any further, take a moment and answer this in the comments. Where do you believe most of your suffering comes from? From circumstances and people outside of you. B. From the way you react to what happens, simply comment A or B. There's no correct answer, only an honest one. And sometimes, honesty is the real beginning. There is something I want to clarify before going any further. What I'm about to describe is not a dramatic event, and it is not something to admire, chase, or recreate. Nothing extraordinary happened on the surface. No visions. No emotional explosion, no sudden feeling of being special. And yet, something fundamental shifted. There are moments in life that you can't locate on a timeline. You can't point to the exact second they began. You only know that before them, you saw the world one way, and after them, you never quite see it the same again. What changed first was not my life, but my sense of separation. For most of my life, I carried a very clear feeling of me in here and the world out there. I experienced myself as someone looking at life from a distance, observing, reacting, judging, protecting. That structure felt solid, unquestionable. And then, in a quiet moment, that structure loosened. Not in a mystical way, not in a poetic way, in a very direct, almost unsettling way. The boundary between me and what I was experiencing no longer felt as real as I had believed. I didn't think my way into this realization. I didn't conclude anything. I simply noticed. And what surprised me most was that there was no urge to hold on to it. No excitement, no sense of achievement. It felt more like recognizing something that had always been there, hidden behind constant mental noise. In the days that followed, life didn't suddenly become easier. My habits didn't disappear. My personality didn't change overnight. Challenges still arose. Emotions still came and went. But something subtle was different. I began to notice a quiet space beneath my reactions. Before, every situation immediately triggered a story, judgment, resistance, interpretation. Those reactions felt like reality itself. Now, I could sense that those reactions were responses, not facts. Walking outside, looking at people, trees, ordinary moments, there was no longer a strong feeling of standing apart from what I was seeing. It felt less like me observing life and more like life simply unfolding with awareness present. This is difficult to describe because language itself divides. The moment we say I and world, we've already created separation. And yet the experience itself was not divided in that way. It's important to say this clearly. This shift did not make me a different person. Old patterns remained, old fears returned, old emotional reflexes still showed up. The difference was not in their absence, but in my relationship to them. Before, when a painful thought appeared, I believed it completely. When discomfort arose, it felt personal and absolute. There was no distance between awareness and experience. Afterward, even when discomfort came, something remained untouched. Not distant, not numb, just present without being consumed. At first, this clarity was brief. Often, I would only recognize it after being pulled back into old reactions, sometimes minutes later, sometimes days later, but gradually the recognition came sooner, not because I tried harder, but because awareness began to notice itself. Another important realization followed. Memory cannot capture this kind of experience. Each time I tried to recall it, I only held fragments. The living quality of it was always beyond recollection. This taught me to be cautious, not only with my own stories, but with the stories of others. Not because they are false, but because no description can fully contain what is essentially direct. That is why I do not encourage seeking experiences like this. The moment experience becomes a goal, the ego quietly takes control again, turning truth into another achievement. What matters is not the moment of recognition, but what follows. How we respond to discomfort, how we relate to resistance, how we meet ordinary life after the door has briefly opened. That moment was not an ending. It was an invitation. And whether we step into that invitation is decided not in extraordinary experiences, but in the smallest, most ordinary moments of our daily lives. One of the most common misunderstandings on this path, and one I personally carried for a long time, is the belief that once something profound is seen, suffering should disappear. We imagine that insight functions like a switch, that after a moment of clarity, life becomes smoother, lighter, somehow resolved. And when that doesn't happen, confusion often follows. Doubt follows. Some even begin to question whether anything real was ever seen at all. The truth is far simpler and far less comforting to the ego. After moments of awakening, suffering does not vanish. Old patterns do not dissolve overnight. Emotional reactions still arise. Life continues to challenge us in familiar ways. What changes is not the presence of suffering, but our relationship to it. Before, discomfort felt absolute. When pain appeared, it felt personal, unquestionable, final. Thoughts and emotions were immediately believed. There was no space between experience and identity. I am suffering felt like a complete description of reality. Afterwards, something subtle begins to shift. Suffering still appears, but it no longer carries the same authority. There is a faint but important distance, not emotional distance, not detachment, but clarity. A recognition that what is being experienced is a reaction, not the total truth. At first, this recognition comes late, sometimes long after the reaction has already played out. Hours later, days later, only then does awareness catch up and see what happened. But even this delayed recognition matters. Because once a reaction is seen clearly, it loses some of its power to repeat itself blindly. Over time, awareness arrives sooner, not through effort, but through familiarity. Gradually, suffering is recognized in its early stages, sometimes as nothing more than a tightening in the body, a subtle mental resistance, a quiet insistence that reality should be different. This does not mean reactions stop happening. It means they are no longer fed unconsciously. Another misunderstanding is the idea that awakening produces emotional immunity, that one becomes calm, untouched, or beyond human struggle. This belief itself becomes a new source of suffering. The reality is more honest. There are still days of frustration, still moments of exhaustion, still emotional turbulence, but these states are no longer interpreted as failure or proof that something has gone wrong. They are simply states, temporary movements within awareness. What phase is not pain, but identification. And this is crucial, because identification is what turns temporary discomfort into ongoing suffering. When reactions are believed completely, they take center stage. When they are seen clearly, they move through more quickly, without needing to be fixed or suppressed. Awakening, then, is not about becoming someone who never reacts. It is about becoming someone who no longer mistakes reactions for identity. This distinction transforms everyday life. Instead of constantly asking, "How do I get rid of this?" a new question arises: can I see what is happening without fighting it? And often, simply seeing is enough. Suffering begins to loosen not because life improves, but because resistance diminishes. The urge to escape softens. The need to control relaxes. In this way, awakening reveals itself not as an extraordinary state, but as an ongoing honesty, a willingness to meet experience as it is, without demanding it be different. And paradoxically, it is this willingness that allows suffering to lose its grip. Not through force, not through denial, but through understanding. There is a truth that took me a long time to accept, not because it is complex, but because it is deeply uncomfortable. Most suffering does not come from what happens, but from our resistance to what happens. At first, this sounds almost dismissive, as if it ignores real pain or difficult circumstances. But this understanding does not deny hardship. It simply points to something subtler, the way suffering is intensified and prolonged by inner opposition. When something goes wrong, the mind reacts immediately. Not always loudly, often quietly, a thought appears. This should not be happening. That single thought creates tension. Reality continues exactly as it is, and now there are two layers: what is happening and what we believe should be happening instead. The gap between those two layers is where suffering grows. Resistance rarely announces itself clearly. It hides inside reasoning, justification, and judgment. It can look like logic, self-protection, or even morality, but beneath all of those forms, the core movement is the same. A refusal to allow the present moment to be exactly what it is. This refusal does not change reality, it only changes our experience of it. Often, resistance is not noticed directly. We simply feel heavy, tense, restless, or emotionally charged. We search for explanations: stress, people, circumstances, bad timing. And while these explanations may be partly true, they often obscure the deeper cause. If we pause and look carefully, we may notice something very simple: a tightening inside, a subtle pushing away, a mental argument against reality. This is resistance. What makes this so difficult to see is that resistance feels justified. The mind insists that things truly should be different. And in many practical situations, that may be true at the level of action. But inwardly, resistance does not improve outcomes. It only creates suffering while the situation unfolds. This understanding does not mean passivity. Acceptance is not agreement. Seeing clearly does not prevent appropriate action, but action that arises from resistance carries tension, urgency, and inner violence. Action that arises from clarity is quieter and more precise. Another layer of resistance is turned inward. We resist our own emotions. We resist fatigue, sadness, anger, fear. We tell ourselves we should not feel this way, especially if we believe we have already understood something about life. This inner resistance creates a deeper form of suffering, one that is harder to explain and easier to ignore. Not only are we experiencing discomfort, we are also fighting the fact that we are experiencing discomfort. This doubling is exhausting. When resistance is seen clearly, something unexpected happens. Suffering does not need to be forced away. It begins to soften on its own. Not because the situation changes, not because the emotion disappears, but because the inner struggle ends. Allowing an experience to exist does not mean liking it. It simply means stopping the war against it. Over time, awareness begins to recognize resistance earlier, sometimes as nothing more than a subtle tightening in the body or a quiet insistence in the mind. Each recognition interrupts the automatic cycle, and in those moments, suffering often dissolves before it fully forms. This is the core insight. Suffering feeds on resistance and weakens in the presence of clarity. Life continues to move, unpredictable and imperfect, but when we stop demanding that it conform to our expectations, we discover that much of what we called suffering was never inherent in life itself. It was created in the space between reality and refusal. One of the quiet truths that slowly reveals itself on this path is that awakening does not follow a single pattern. There is no universal script, no correct sequence of experiences, no measurable standard by which one person's realization can be compared to another's. And yet, comparison is almost unavoidable. As soon as we begin to hear stories, someone describing a sudden breakthrough, another speaking of lasting peace, another claiming a disappearance of the self, the mind naturally turns inward and asks, "What about me? Was my experience deep enough? Did I miss something? Am I behind?" These questions seem innocent, even sincere, but they quietly shift attention away from lived reality and toward mental evaluation. Instead of being present with what is unfolding, we begin measuring it against borrowed narratives. The truth is, every human being arrives at clarity through a completely different doorway. Our conditioning, temperament, emotional history, and sensitivity all shape how insight appears. For some, it arrives suddenly and unmistakably. For others, it unfolds gradually, almost imperceptibly, woven into ordinary moments. What matters is not how dramatic the experience is, but what it reveals. True insight is not defined by intensity. It is defined by honesty, not by how extraordinary it feels, but by how it changes our relationship to everyday life. There are moments of recognition that leave no story behind, no memory that can be proudly retold, yet they quietly loosen identification, soften resistance, and reduce unnecessary suffering. These moments rarely attract attention, but they transform life from the inside. The danger of comparison is that it turns awakening into an achievement. Once that happens, the ego re-enters through the back door. It begins chasing validation, certainty, and confirmation, even in spiritual language. Awakening then becomes something to possess rather than something to live. This is why it is so important to allow your experience to be exactly what it is, without forcing it into a predefined shape. There is no requirement to feel a certain way, no obligation to interpret what happens, no need to announce progress. Clarity does not demand recognition. When comparison falls away, something subtle shifts. Attention returns to what is actually happening, not what should be happening. Small recognitions regain their importance. The moment you notice resistance, the moment you pause before reacting, the moment you realize you are not the thought you are having. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are the real substance of awakening. The path is not about becoming someone else. It is about stopping the effort to measure, improve, or complete oneself. Each time comparison arises and is seen clearly, another layer of unnecessary struggle loosens. In this way, awakening becomes less about identity and more about intimacy. Intimacy with experience as it is, without filters or expectations. And when that intimacy is allowed, it does not need to look like anyone else's journey. It only needs to be real. There is a stage on this path that is rarely spoken about clearly, not because it is rare, but because it is uncomfortable to admit. It is the moment when insight has occurred, but freedom has not yet stabilized. At this stage, something subtle happens. The ego does not disappear, it evolves. Before, it sought security through success, approval, control, or recognition. After insight, those desires may soften, but the underlying movement, the need to become something, quietly continues, wearing a more refined mask. Now it wants understanding. It wants depth. It wants to be someone who has seen. This is what is often called the spiritual ego, though it rarely announces itself that way. It does not boast loudly. It operates through comparison, subtle superiority, and hidden standards. I react less than before. I understand this more deeply now. I'm no longer caught the way others are. These thoughts may not even feel like thoughts. They feel like facts. And that is precisely why they are so convincing. The danger here is not arrogance. The danger is identification. The moment we believe we are someone who is awakened, someone who knows, someone who is beyond ordinary confusion, we have turned insight into an identity. And identities must be protected. From that moment on, every emotional reaction becomes a problem. Every moment of irritation becomes a contradiction. Every return of fear or confusion feels like failure. Suffering reappears, but now it is layered with self-judgment. I shouldn't feel this way anymore. I thought I was past this. Something must be wrong with me. This form of suffering is especially painful because it is hidden beneath spiritual language. The mind convinces itself that it is seeking truth, while quietly reinforcing a new image of self. Another expression of this trap is the pursuit of special states or abilities. Peace that never wavers, awareness that never contracts, insight that remains permanently accessible. These goals appear noble, but they are still future-oriented. They postpone wholeness. The structure is familiar. When I reach this level, I will finally be free. But freedom does not arrive through accumulation. It arrives through subtraction. What must be released is not the experience, but the ownership of the experience. Not insight, but the identity formed around insight. True clarity does not claim itself. It remains open, uncertain, and available. The moment it becomes something to defend, it has already been lost. This realization brings humility, not forced humility, but natural humility. The understanding that awakening is not a status, and never was. It is a living sensitivity that appears when we are no longer invested in being someone. The spiritual ego does not vanish forever. It may return in new forms at unexpected moments, but once it has been clearly seen, it loses its authority. It cannot operate in the light of awareness. And with each recognition, the path becomes simpler, quieter, and more honest, less about becoming and more about letting go. As the journey continues, one truth slowly becomes unavoidable. There is no final arrival, no permanent state where life becomes flawless, reactions disappear, or uncertainty ends forever. At first, this realization can feel disappointing, even discouraging. But with time, it reveals itself as a quiet liberation. Without a final destination, the pressure to become something dissolves. The endless effort to complete oneself begins to loosen. What remains is not confusion, but simplicity. Awakening, in this sense, is not about achieving a higher version of oneself. It is about no longer being at war with what is already here. When the search relaxes, attention naturally returns to the present moment, not as an idea but as lived experience. Sensations rise, thoughts pass through, emotions move, and none of them need to be corrected. What changes is not the content of experience, but the relationship to it. Discomfort still appears, sadness still visits, frustration still arises, but these states no longer define the whole landscape. They are movements within awareness, not threats to identity. This brings a different kind of ease, not the ease of pleasure, but the ease of honesty. There is no longer a constant need to escape, improve, or resolve everything immediately. Life is allowed to be unfinished. Gradually, this understanding becomes embodied, not as a practice, but as a way of being. Suffering is noticed early, often before it fully forms. Resistance is recognized as tension rather than truth. And when it is seen, it loses its grip without force. At times, one may still choose to engage fully, to be moved, to be affected, to step into the drama of life. But now it is conscious. Participation is voluntary, not compulsory. This is not detachment. It is intimacy without entanglement. Looking back, it becomes clear that this path was never about transcendence. It was about returning to immediacy, to simplicity, to the ordinary reality that was always present but overlooked. There is nothing to claim at the end of this journey. No title, no conclusion, no final understanding, only a quiet openness that remains available in each moment. And in that openness, life continues, complex, unpredictable, imperfect, but no longer heavy in the way it once was, not because it has changed, but because the resistance to it has softened. And perhaps that is the most honest ending possible. If there is one lesson that quietly emerges from everything shared so far, it is this. Suffering is not something that needs to be defeated, escaped, or solved. It needs to be understood. Not conceptually, not philosophically, but directly, in the way it arises moment by moment in our own experience. Most of us live as if peace is something that will arrive later, after we fix ourselves, after life becomes easier, after we understand enough. But this mindset keeps pushing wholeness into the future. What this journey reveals instead is something far simpler and far more confronting. Peace is not missing. It is obscured by resistance. The deepest insight here is not spiritual, mystical, or extraordinary. It is deeply human. Whenever we suffer, there is almost always a subtle refusal happening inside us, a belief that reality should be different from what it is right now. And that refusal, even when justified, is what turns difficulty into suffering. The practical application of this insight does not require belief or discipline. It requires honesty. When discomfort appears in your daily life, pause not to fix it, but to notice how you are meeting it. Are you arguing with it? Judging it? Trying to escape it? Or can you simply allow it to exist without adding a second layer of resistance? This does not mean becoming passive or accepting injustice. It means acting from clarity rather than inner conflict. When resistance softens, action becomes cleaner, more precise, and less exhausting. So the invitation is simple. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this feeling?" ask, "What am I resisting right now?" That single shift has the power to change the entire quality of your life, not by making it perfect, but by making it honest. If this reflection resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel us to support the creation of more thoughtful, grounded, and meaningful content. Your presence and attention are what keep these conversations alive.